Hey, what's up guys? Guardian here, coming guys with a brand new deck profile for the premium format. Yeah, it's been I think a year since the last one with MLB, and we are finally back to do a profile for premium. This time we're doing Gold Paladin with the introduction of Liberator Holy Shine Dragon. And as you can see, he's got a pretty old card next to him, and a card that really means a lot to me, which is Blaster Blade Liberator. So the new iteration on the Liberator support has actually allowed Blaster Blade Liberator to return to some degree and become more relevant since, Blaster Blade Liberator, he's got a couple of cards that can work with him and overall changes the Liberator strategy to allow us to use Holy Shine Dragon to its fullest capability and use as many counterblasts as we can. Without further ado, let's get stuck into the deck and I'll show you guys what I'm playing. So, to start with the grade 3s, we of course have the brand new grade 3 from the recent V Clan collection, being 4 copies of Holy Shine Dragon. So, this thing's nuts. I'm pretty sure most of us might know what this does by now, since it got revealed. But of course, when you write it, you're going to get your Excel marker, which we are going to go for Excel 2 to get a draw. But when he is placed by riding on top of a Liberator, you get a Counterblast 1, and then search your deck for a Liberator with a different name to Holy Shine, and then ride that as stand from your deck. And then if you have 4 or more cards in your damage zone, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up the 2 cards from among them, and call them to Reguard Circle. So kind of like a Limit Break-esque skill attached to the first bit there, which is pretty nice. So you get 2 free calls on the top 5, but the main thing about that is that we get to re-ride into a different Liberator name from our deck, which, in case you've been living under a rock, we are going to be riding into Percival. And by doing this, we get a second marker by riding into the Percival course naturally, but then we also get the ability to use his skill to generate us a third Excel marker, which is pretty insane. Holy Shine basically takes Percival to the next level. I mean, like he wasn't already good enough, but now we can ride him. And then also, the funny thing is that the Vanguard skill of Percival is actually going to come up here to make our rear guards on the Excel markers become a bit bigger, allowing us to get over some numbers there, which is pretty cool. Now, he does also have a second skill, which is whilst he's in the soul, at the end of the turn, if you have 4 or more cards in your damage zone, you can put this card from your soul back into your hand. So, he just returns himself later, as long as you got Limit Break, basically, which is insane, because now we have a really consistent way to make sure that we can have extra copies of Holy Shine in our hand, so that we can go into the Ultima a lot more consistently with this deck, which, this deck is a Ultima-based deck as one of the main win conditions, but the one thing I like about this deck is that it is very heavy on the counterblast side, but we do play a few countercharging engines to help with that. And it's all about managing our resources effectively and going with that, basically. So Holy Shine, this is the new Liberator from the V series, and he is a great addition to make Liberators go up in the world in the premium format. So, of course, we just went over him, but in premium, we do have access to 4 copies of Percival, which we are playing. What can I say about this card? He's amazing. We can play 4 in premium. We're just going to play 4. And, getting the Agravale as well, getting a good beat stick, which can return to our hand. And also, Agravale being sort of like a miniature soul charging engine in this deck, has some synergy with some other cards in the deck, which we'll go over. So 4 copies of Percival, of course, to go with the Holy Shine. And then next we have the grade 2s, so of course we need to make sure that we have a good amount of Liberators in this deck. So most of the grade 2s, I think, if not all, are pretty much Liberators. So the first Liberator, which is the return of one of my favourite cards in the game, Blaster Blade Liberator. So and I even have my old SP one here that I got from my booster box back in the day, and of course the 3 others from the trial decks, and this thing's gone up in the world, I think. It's gone up a bit in price, but I'd commend anyone that still has these or maybe is able to find any, because, I would be surprised if you're able to find some at this point, because this card's really, really old and it has not seen a reprint for years. Yeah, with Blaster Blade Liberator, he has he has 1 skill, but it can activate on Van or Rhea, which is you can counterblast 2, as long as you've got a Liberator Vanguard, and you can basically retire the front row, basically. It's a counterblast 2, so it's not really something that's going to come up that often. It's a bit too heavy on the cost there. But what I will say with Blastoise Liberator is that he's a Liberator, so he can allow us to trigger the Holy Shiny skill, and also he has a countercharging engine that works with him, which is one of the main things about this guy that I love in this deck. So yeah, Blastoise Liberator, he is back, and yeah, never been better. So, 4 copies of him, and then we are playing a card that kind of synergizes with the Blastoise Liberator, being 3 copies of Liberator Star Rain Trumpeter. So, this is an older card, so it's going to be a little bit weird in terms of the way the skill's worded, but basically, long story short, is that you can put a Blastoise Liberator from your soul or your drop zone on top of the deck. You then get to shuffle the deck, and then you get to call the top card of your deck if it's a Gold Paladin. Now, everything in this deck is a Gold Paladin, so you don't have to worry about that. Because we can push the Blastoise Liberators into our soul with cards like Agravale very easily, we can actually get just free calls from the Trumpeter and ways to extend our board just really, really easily. And of course, being able to recycle the Blastoise Liberators from the drop zone is also just really, really nice. So I wanted to just go for 3 copies. I did get 4 of this just in case, but I felt like 3 was a bit more reasonable, just because you do need the Blastoise Liberator for this to do anything. So I feel like 4 copies was a little bit too greedy, but I feel like it's just a really good engine piece that just works really, really well with Blastoise. So yeah, 3 copies of her. It's nice to see her back again. And then next we are playing one of the better Liberators in the V-Series, which is 2 copies of Agravale. I wanted to go for 2 of him at least, just because I like having multiples of him available, just because he's a really good beat stick. And like I said, you can actually push rear guards into your soul with this to build up soul for soul blasting costs, but mainly to synergize with the Blaster Blade and the Trumpeter there is also really, really nice. He's also not too bad of a ride target for the Counterblast, but you do need to be careful because sometimes you might end up riding this and you actually don't want to use that Counterblast skill, since you might want to hold onto it for the Holy Shine Dragon, so do bear that in mind. Now, this is where it gets a bit funky here. So we're not only just doing 2 copies of the V-Series Agravale, but we're also doing 1 copy of the old Agravale. This is something that I saw getting used, and I think it's just really, really cool in theory, because since you can call this from the deck with your Percival, either or, if you have the excess Counterblast, you can actually put more Counterblast into the old Agravale to basically look at the top 3 for a Liberator and then call it. So, yeah, it's basically another way to extend your board even further, because the way this deck kind of wants to work is basically get a lot of bodies on the field and just poke as much as you can, because every attack is either a damage or it's going to be 1 card out the opponent's hand. So that's kind of how you want to work with this deck. But yeah, you can actually merge your countercharging engines in this deck with the Agravale to basically allow you to extend further and fill your board up a bit faster, basically. But like I said, you know, you're going to have to look at things like a Counterblast for the Holy Shine Dragon, Counterblast for the Percival, a Counterblast for this. It's going to rack up pretty heavily, but we will get to the countercharging bit in a very short moment, and it'll all make sense soon. So, 3 Agravale, 2 being the V-Series, 1 being the original. And then the final grade 2 of the deck, because this is an ultimate strategy, we are doing the 1 copy of Providential Angel, just so we can shut our opponent off from Sentinels, or at least multiples from the hand. And yeah, it's just a nice piece to have when you're going to go for the ultimate strategy. So that is it for the grade 2s. So going into the grade 1s, we have the key card here that makes a Blastoise Liberator just insanely good with a deck like this that counterblast so much, being 4 copies of White Rainbow Liberator Balan. So this guy came out in set 15 in the Break Ride era, and yeah, I think that was the final set if I remember, with the Glenneos. And yeah, this card is pretty cool because it says, whilst it's on the rear, when your Blastoise Liberator is placed on rear guard circle, if you have a Vanguard Liberator in the card name, you choose the card in your damage zone, and you turn it face up. So, your Blastoise Liberator can be placed anywhere. As long as you have a Liberator Vanguard, you get a counter charge. Now, picture this. You have multiple copies of these on the field. You call 1 Blastoise Liberator down, you counter charge equal to the number of Balanta you have. So you're looking, 2, 3, like basically as many as you have a Balan, when you call a Blastoise Liberator down, that's how many counter charges you get. So this deck can just counter charge out with the wazoo, and it gets really insane. And yeah, that's how we can get away with so many counterblast skills, like in a nutshell, is just because we can actually refund them all back very easily if we have access to the balance. So yeah, of course, we want to be playing 4 copies of this. It's absolutely insane. Alright, so for the rest of the grade ones, we are playing the 4 copies of the V Series Gorbaduck, just so that we can filter for our grade 3s, because, yeah, all of our grade 3s are really good, so we want to have access to them. Even if we just hard add Percival, it's still good, because it gives us follow-up Percivals, just in case we don't have the Holy Shines to re-ride. So that's really nice there. Also, the fact that we can add our Heal Guardians to our hand, so we have access to the Heal Guard skills in the early game, but then also adding Heal triggers to our hand anyway, just to have access to a G Guard in the later stages is also really solid. Also, Gorbaduck being a 13k beat stick, as long as you've called twice that turn, on an Excel 2 marker, it'd be 18, so it's also a really good beat stick that you can poke with, and also a booster if necessary. So yeah, really, really cool. So playing 4 copies of Gorbaduck. And then next we are playing 3 copies of another Liberator, but this is the V Series version, with 3 copies of Josephus. So Josephus, he's another pretty good right target, which is one of the main reasons why I wanted to add this. But the other main reason is the fact that he is basically another way for us to countercharge in this deck. Now it's a little bit more RNG based, this card, just because you do have to call him when he's placed on rear from your deck. You can Soul Blast 1 to countercharge, and then you can Soul Blast another 1 to then draw a card. So you have access to countercharge and draw power. You do have the Soul Blast 2, but to be fair, Soul in this deck is not that much of an issue. It can be sometimes, but we do have other pieces in the deck that allow us to generate Soul, like the critical triggers and also some other pieces, which we'll get to in a bit. So yeah, when you ride on top of the Josephus, you can look at the top card of the deck, and you may call it to rear. So yeah, if it's a trigger, you're going to keep it there, and if it's a unit, you can call it to the board and just get a free plus. So really, really cool. Nice counter charging and draw engine there as well. So 3 copies of him. And then also, one of the main intentions with having the more Liberator names in the deck, like I showed you earlier, is that the old Agravale can only call Liberators from the top 3. So it's actually pretty, it's a good idea to have a majority of your cards be Liberators in the deck. Now, of course, we do want to play some non-Liberators, just so we can synergize the cards together. And one of those cards is one of my favorite, actually, and it's actually really cool to see this, is 3 copies of Brenius. So, Brenius is really cool because one of the issues with a Counterblast reliant deck is your opponent gets to decide how many Counterblasts you have. So, with Brenius, what you can do with this card is that you can call it down on your grade 2 turn, and then what you can do here is that you can, say, ride into your Holy Shine Dragon on your grade 3 turn, right? Now, let's say you don't have any Counterblast because your opponent's being mean and not giving you CB. Understandable, I think, especially with something like this. So what you could do is that you could ride your Holy Shine and then put this into your Soul to then draw a card and then call something. You could call the Heal Guardian down and then deal yourself a damage. And then that will give you access to the CB that you need for the Holy Shine Dragon to, at least at minimal, get the Excel marker from this and the Excel marker from Percival. Now, you will miss out on the 3rd Excel marker from the Percival skill, which is debatable to whether that's worth it or not, but as long as you've got some CB to work with, that is the key here, because what we can do later in the main phases is that we can call our balance down with Blaster Blade Liberator to then countercharge that CB to then get more value out of it in the later stages, which is why sometimes it can be pretty good to add extra Percivals to your hand with your Gorbaduck, just because if you're not able to trigger it on the Vanguard circle from the re-ride, if you have one in your hand, you can call that down after you've done a countercharge. So that's also pretty cool. He's a pretty cool tech. Would I say he's necessary? It's debatable. I think he's got some applications to him that make him pretty good. And also the fact that he goes into the Soul as well is pretty good as well, because he gives you Soul Charge in a way, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I just like the interaction that he has with the Heal Guardian and giving us Counterblast, basically. So that's why I'm going with him. Alright, so now we have the grade 0. So first we're doing the V-Series starter, just for a simple draw, and the Quick Shield can be nice at times with discard fodder. Yeah, there's no real, interesting starter that we could play in this deck that I could think of, so V-Series 1 is just good, just because we get that draw. And then next for the triggers, we are doing the 4 copies of the Golden Lion, just because he's the stride crit. Comes in handy when a lot of our grade 3s in the deck are really good and we want to keep them most of the time, so starting with this instead can be pretty nice. Other triggers, we have 3 more crit in the form of the Thedora. Of course, this is just the in soul crit, which is really good, so 3 copies of that. And then obviously with the 7 crit, you can imagine what I'm doing, is that I'm playing 1 stand in the deck. Now this is in the form of a Liberator card, which is pretty cool. Just because when Ketchgal Liberator is called from your deck, you got to put it back to the bottom of your deck, and then look at top 3, and then call something that isn't Ketchgal. Now the cool thing is that you don't have to call a Liberator with him, so which is really, really nice. So if you see him and you call him, you get to basically recall something else, basically, and then put the stand back into the deck, which is pretty nice. Now, you can experiment with some other stand triggers that can be maybe placed from the hand, but I do kind of like the fact that this has Liberator in the name, so if you do see this from the old Agravale, this is something that you could call and actually reshuffle back into the deck, and then maybe filter into something that isn't a Liberator necessarily. So that's actually pretty nice. And then also the applications with the stand trigger in the deck is that the ultimate turn will just be utility based because it's going to have more multi-attack rather than the outmost power, just because the old stand triggers of course have the 5k and not the 10k. So if you want to go for a restand board play, that is something you can do in this deck and comes in pretty clutch. So yeah. So 1 copy of Ketchgal. And then for the remaining triggers, of course, we have the 4 copies of the Draw PG, just for draws, and then Perfect Guards, of course. And then with golds, you can actually call these from the deck with your Slimy Flares from the G Guardians, and then PG from the deck, which is really, really cool. So 4 copies of those. And then the final card of the main deck, of course, is the 4 Heal Guardian, which is just really, really cool. So many applications. Stride Fodder, grade 3, Heal Guard for the early game, G Guards for the late game. Amazing. So playing 4 copies of those. Alright, so finally we have the G-Zone. We are doing the 2 copies of Idvarius. This is basically the new restanding G unit that we got for golds, which is really cool to see. It is a little bit on the costly side, just because you do have to manage yourself a little bit for the skill. But it's really cool how she gives power to any of your called rear guards, which is nice. And yeah, she has the restanding skill, which is a little bit costly, but it's there just in case we need it in a clutch. Then next, a G unit that I use a lot more, which is 2 copies of the Brambent Dragon. This is really nice with the deck just because it doesn't actually cost us resources. You just have to move rear guards and that's it. So no Soul Blast, no Counter Blast, and he's also able to generate us some multi-attack, as well as getting a crit. So he's actually pretty good for the deck, and if you're going to play any G unit, I definitely recommend playing a couple of these. So 2 copies of him. And then of course we have the 2 copies of Spearex Dragon. Just in case we want to go into him to help call a field. The deck kind of calls the field already, but yeah, extra help is always, granted, and Spearex can definitely do that in case we are looking to make more of a board, so 2 copies of him. And then next we are doing the 2 copies of Gurgwit Helios, just because it's very, really good with the guard restrict on it. Punishes any deck that plays grade 1's perfect guards, so yeah, it's a really nice way to close out games in case you're going against a deck like that. And then we also have the 2 copies of the Glorious Reigning Dragon. This card's actually really, really cool in this deck because since we can generate so many markers, we can actually fill the board up pretty easily. So this can sometimes actually be a better out as a finisher to close the game out instead of ultimate sometimes. So yeah, and the fact that he's only 1 CB as well can sometimes come in clutch, since ultimate, of course, is 2 Counterblast. Which, speaking of the devil, we do obviously have the main guy, Ultima. He will be winning most of your games. There's no lie there. But yeah, he is the main win con of the deck. So don't be surprised if you do go into him a lot. But also just bear in mind that he's not the end-all be-all. Do bear in mind what you have available, since you do need to dedicate 2 Counterblast into him, and you also need to set up the ultimate stride as well. So just bear in mind your options and go with the thing that will be the most effective, basically. So yeah, so 1 copy of Ultima. Then for the G Guardians, we of course have the 1 copy of Elise, just because this really helps us with getting to the GB count to help us go into the Ultima. We then have the 2 copies of Slimy Flare, just because this has a really nice interaction with the Perfect Guard, of course, to then get that PG skill from the deck. But it's overall just a really good G Guardian in itself. And then last but not least, for the G Guardians, we have 2 copies of the Sanctified Dragon. So yeah, this is actually pretty cool, because when you place it on the Guardian Circle, you Soul Blast 1, look at the top 2 cards from your deck, choose 2 unit cards from among them, put them to the Guardian Circle, and then discard the rest. And then if you called 1 or more grade 1 or greater cards, you draw a card. So yeah, you just get a refund for the card that you discarded for the G Guardian. you get some free Guardians to the Guardian Circle, and maybe you can draw into something else that'll give you more shield value. So yeah, or it might draw you into a piece for your follow-up turn. So that's also pretty cool. But yeah, that is it for the G Guardians, and yeah, that is it for the G Zone. So yeah, that is it for the entire deck. Liberators are back, and it's really cool to see the reintroduction of Holy Shine, and then also alongside it, bringing some old faces back with the Blastword Liberator, and also the Liberator Trumpeter as well, is really cool to see. So yeah, really happy about this deck. Tell me guys what you think about it in the comment section below. Not too sure when the next premium deck I'll upload is, but yeah, whenever there's a cool premium deck that I want to profile on the channel, you can expect that I will help myself to construct it and bring it to you guys. So yeah, so really cool to see Blastword Liberator back, and it's really cool to have a new premium deck to be playing with. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. There will be a deck log in the description below. This is Guardian 205, signing out.